folks, welcome to another episode of Film Study. We're back here for part two of the discussion of the offense against the 49ers and that great win on Monday night. Here doing it with me is Jonas Schaefer. Jonas, one of the great people to talk football with. You get a chance to talk to him online, in person, highly recommend it. And you'll probably notice this in his style, just how much fun it is to talk football with Jonas. But Jonas, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. Thanks for the kind words.
All right. One of my favorite writers, very technical, very cerebral, and you'll pick up on that in the show here. But a lot of that was in that first episode, and I'd really encourage you to go back and listen to it. He puts the pieces together very well. We talked about Lamar's opportunity set as always. We talked about what the Ravens win meant to them in week 16. Where they can go with that. We talked about whether or not the Ravens are of the mind of some fans that they really don't want an extra bye week off. And I think the answer is unanimously no on that they want to bye very badly. But please go ahead and download that episode, and it's a lot of fun, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But getting back to part two, we'll start as we always do with the offensive line here. And I'll just start by saying the offensive line was responsible for both of the sacks completely. That's not always the case because sometimes you have a free runner, or Lamar holds the ball too long, or other things. In this case, how I scored it, they were responsible for all of those 2 sacks. They were responsible for the one other quarterback hit. They were responsible for 9 pressures in the game, which is a lot. And they had 2 very costly penalties in the game, which kind of tended to hold down the scores of a couple players, which we'll be getting into a little bit. We'll go ahead and start at left tackle.
Let's start with the other elephant in the room. Interesting to see Ronnie graded as poorly as you have him here. You gave him a big old honking F. You acknowledged that it was just a fraction of a point away from a D-. You have him with contributions to 5 pressure events. I guess interesting to see those stats in contrast, and I don't know if you're sick of it, but just looking at some of the PFF data, they had Ronnie with 0 pressures allowed. So I guess what stuck out to you about what he did poorly and maybe what he did well, if there was anything that you thought he did well.
Let's point to the one big one, because he had a face mask penalty, and that's unfortunate. One of the things that comes up all the time is PFF has a tremendous underweight, and that's my opinion, on penalties. I think it's penalties. First of all, they stall drives, but second of all, they give options to defense on to accept the penalty or not, which is really bad. Look at the chop block penalty. That didn't have to be accepted for it to be disastrous for San Francisco in terms of the interception that eventually occurred. But also their individual plays, and when you have a big positive gain on offense, anyhow, there's usually a lot of people with their hand out for credit for that. There's all the offensive linemen contributed to it. There's the receiver did something in a positive. The quarterback did something. You may have had a running back somehow that drew off coverage and whatnot. But whether it's a run or pass, there's multiple players who deserve a portion of that responsibility. When you have a penalty, not only is it very serious in terms of the loss on the play and the variance granted to the defense on the play, it's also that one person. It's hard to get away from the fact that one person is the one person responsible for it. And the second component is it gives an option to the other team if it's a post-snap penalty that is exceptionally bad. So anyway, I've always basically you can make 2 pretty decent run blocks and it offsets a holding penalty in PFF system. No way in hell. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all. And I have talked to some of their people in the organization. They understand this is a flaw in the system, and they're going to be changing it prospectively, perhaps as early as 2024. So I'm looking forward to that going forward. Their head of R&D has talked to me a little bit about that in terms of what they've got coming. Yeah. But anyway, by
the way, have you had I think you've had Gordon McGinnis on your show, right?
I've had many PFF people on the show many times. Gordon's been on a couple times. Timo Riska, Eric Eager, a bunch of their interns who have just some fantastic thought experiments with what they do. Neil Hornsby, the originator of PFF, has been on the show. So I'm very embedded with them. In some way.
Go again.
No, I'm sorry. You froze up on me for a second. Yeah, I know them well. You probably know Gordon very well. I got a chance to talk to Gordon when we were over in London. Did you? Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say I talked to him before we went to London, but I hadn't got the chance to talk to him until Lamar happened to be PFF's number 1 passer, and then I was like, hey, let me figure out why he's higher graded than he was when he won the MVP. But yeah, he was great to talk to, and all those guys on PFF are pretty entertaining. It's always cool to see them hired away by actual NFL organizations, and especially when those NFL organizations embrace analytics and do cool stuff.
Yeah. And they are a very talented group of people. There's no doubt about it. Extraordinarily talented group of people, and they're very responsive too. So offensive line things like when I have a question about Stanley had, I think, 4 pressures, and I sent them to them, and they'll respond to every single one about here's what I saw, and kind of thing. And some of it just ends up being difference of methodology and difference of definition, and some of it ends up being difference of opinion. And occasionally there's one that they'll change. And sometimes there's one that they convince me I've got the wrong score on it. I make a change to it. But anyway, it's good to be able to have the dialogue with them, because we're both cooking with water. It's a matter of how we weight these things we're seeing, as we go through this. Okay, real quick through Stanley here, and this is what basically happened to him during the game. He missed 8 snaps. It probably would have been more, but McCary got hurt midway through that. So McCary is the guy who replaced him. Had contributions to 5 pressure events, 3 pressures. That's 2 fulls and 2 halves, and 1/4 of a sack. I gave to him as well. Also had a shared penetration on run loss, 7 missed blocks. Here's the bad number. Now, 7 missed blocks, a lot of missed blocks anyway, but 5 of them were losses at the line of scrimmage, which means those might have been leading to a pressure or another event that might have blown up a run play, except that it didn't happen because the ball got out or Lamar ran or whatever happened. So that's a bad number. 1 block in level 2, one pancake. He made 3 of 3 pulls and had 2 highlights in this game. Interesting. Stanley's making still some outstanding plays at the line of scrimmage, even when he's not playing well, of blocking a guy, knowing that guy is through, particularly when he pitches him inside, even without an assigned blocker there. And then he'll try and knock another guy free of the backside of a run play fairly frequently. Or it can be even on a pass that occurs, but it's more frequently on the backside of a run play. So you can still see Stanley has all of this veteran savvy there, all of this ability, all of this knowledge of how to play left tackle. It's just body is betraying him in terms of being able to put it into place. You made a great point earlier, by the way, during the first show, Jonas, that you could see the lateral mobility is still there, the ability to mirror is still there, and he still does a good job of staying in front of those pass rushers. They just take him right back into the quarterback.
Yeah, I guess the patient zero for that situation was the Arizona game, where he just it gave us that incredible clip of Lamar thrown with one arm or with one leg, and his body kind of cocked like some kind of modernist painting, but that was I guess a sign of things to come. And
this is what I was talking about when I said cerebral, by the way. Who else is going to come up with modernist painting as an analogy for a quarterback throw? But that's great. That's like something the Simpsons writers would do. That's fantastic.
Yeah. But by the way, like maybe we can talk about this off mic, but my notion for Lamar and kind of how he's developed as a passer this year, and this is somewhat insulting to him and maybe to T. Martin, because it denigrates everything they do well. But don't you feel like in a way Lamar's kind of become post footwork? He doesn't need the base that 99% of quarterbacks do need to get throws off relatively accurate. And you could say that maybe that is a problem with him when he's throwing more than 20 yards downfield, because he tends to kind of gun it as opposed to lofting it. And I don't know enough about quarterback mechanics, but when you think about that incredible 2-point conversion and the way that his body was positioned and how he had to kind of throw it to his right, even as his feet are basically parallel to the goal line, it's just there's arm talent, and then there's also just the idea that you don't need to do anything remotely close to what is prescripted to actually get the job done. And it's just kind of amazing.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, and particularly that 2-point conversion. It's one of the most incredible throws I've ever seen. The window was actually very small on that play to get it in there, and he was getting his feet undercut as he threw it. As just a remarkable throw and a critical 2-point conversion in terms of making sure that game got to overtime. And you mentioned that he was just a fraction of a point short. It's actually like 8 points on a 100-point scale that Stanley was short of being a D-. So it's a pretty bad game. And there's a big adjustment in there for Bosa and Young being his opponents. So he's got certainly above average opponents. That's also, by the way, something PFF is putting a lot of effort into doing. They'd resisted for 15 years, probably trying to put in an opponent component to their offensive line play, but Timo Riska, their R&D guy, has done some great work with it this year, and was describing that on the show. But it's very impressive, and hopefully they include that in their going forward models as well.
Would that be for other matchups as well, or just line play?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I know he started with line play, and he's done a kind of the basis of it is an N factor model, which basically says, what was my expectation based on a whole bunch of different N factors. It'd be like down and distance, the score in the game, things like that in terms of how I should be able to pass protect, and then how did I actually pass protect in terms of average score that's giving this difference. And Tyler Linderbaum in particular has shown up very well on that sort of comparison for this year. So that's been he's been one of the Ravens linemen who's been really top notch in that way.
Right. So I guess let's go to the interior. Who stood out to you in good ways and bad ways?
Let's start with John Simpson. I think the bad news comes first before the good. He took kind of a step back in this game. Illegal use of hands negated the PL20 to Bateman fairly early in the game, that second quarter, I think. He had shares in 3 pass rush events, which, given the shares, that's not the end of the world. A third of a quarterback hit, a third of a pressure, and a third and a quarter of the 2 sacks. So each of those he had a pair of. He actually didn't give up any plain pressures in the game. Had 5 missed blocks, 3 of those at the line of scrimmage, 1 point on 5 pulls. He did actually have a penetration that occurred for a -1 point on there. So he made 2 out of 5, but then he lost a point on 1 of the 3 he had. So he got 1 net point. 2 level 2 blocks, no pancakes, 1 highlight. A D for the game. He has got to figure out the penalties. And obviously, I thought this was the big thing coming into this year, was that the Ravens were a team who could get him over some of the excuses that had occurred in Oakland, in Las Vegas, rather. And we were there, obviously, at the start of camp, and I don't know how legitimate it seemed to you, the Saleh thing, but I think we were both there at the same time when Harbaugh announced it, that, John Simpson's, by the way, going to get his chance next week. And I'm wondering, if that wasn't a boondoggle the entire time, if they weren't basically saying, we need to motivate John Simpson, so we're going to put Saleh ahead of him to start the season, and then we'll start the OTAs, and then we'll see how that lights a fire on him and stops the excuses from ending, or at least we can preach that to him as he's waiting for his turn. But I have this feeling that if you can't cure a guy of that of penalties in all those years in Las Vegas, they could have looked at it and said, this is an opportunity to make a good lineman out of a bad one, because most of what's wrong with him is the penalties.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of motivation, it might have also been trying to light a fire under Ben Cleveland as well. Mm-hmm. To not even mention him in that top 2, and obviously, I think we all knew at that point that he was probably a distant third, even though, ironically, by the end of the preseason, he was pretty clearly the second best guard at that spot, because what a disastrous preseason that was for Saleh. It ended up being. I mean, Simpson, in getting to know him, if you ever get a chance to talk to him, he's just a delightful guy to talk to. Not that explains any way of his shortcomings as a blocker. It was interesting. It has been interesting in getting to know him, that he was, like Tyler Linderbaum, a very accomplished wrestler in high school. So you would think that his hand fighting would be better because of that skill set, and just how essential that is to so many guys who do make that transition from, early stardom in wrestling to, professional career in football, whether it's on the defensive line, offensive line, wherever. So again, I don't know what kind of classification he was as a wrestler. Obviously he was a, vaunted enough recruit to go to Clemson, and was what, a day 2 pick, I think, that early day 3. I forget where he was taken overall, but he's had some highs this year. He's had some lows. I guess the best thing that you can say is that we've seen more games from him where he's just been kind of in the background. Obviously Aaron Donald had his way with him a bunch of times in that Rams game, but Aaron Donald has his way with a bunch of guys on John Simpson's level. So is he going to all of a sudden become an above average left guard? Probably not. But he just needs to, like you said, clean up the penalties. Take care of the dirty work. Be the guy who's cleaning out that left tackle if no one's lining up over him to kind of help give Ronnie a boost when he needs it. And then I think the Ravens will have a fighting chance for that offensive line against pretty much anyone that they go against.
Yeah. So D for the game for this Simpson, for a D in this game for Simpson. He has not failed this year in any game, which is, I think that's something to pull away from this, is that he hasn't been at that level in any game. He hasn't fallen off the table. And given the state of the National Football League and where offensive line play is at this point in the season, I think the Ravens are pretty lucky to have John Simpson at left guard. I don't think that there are a whole lot of teams, National Football League, who have somebody who's so much decidedly better and been healthy the whole time. That with the second condition being a big part of that, that can be exciting. I don't think the Ravens have organizationally accomplished what I think the goal must have been, which is that they thought they could reduce their penalties because of how well coached they are.
Yeah, and if Simpson at a certain point becomes unplayable, then Ben Cleveland is a more than capable backup. He didn't embarrass himself or really come close on Monday, and I think he's done a pretty good job overall at if not developing into the guy that the Ravens thought he would be when they drafted him in the 3rd round. He was obviously like a guy that, I forget if it was John or Greg Roman called him like the best run blocker in the draft. Then at least becoming a solid option that you can bring off the bench and be not an overwhelming weak link for that offensive line.
Yeah, the Ravens do have good offensive line depth. They're guys all the way down to number 8 or even 9 are quite good. Salah's the only guy who's a true developmental player all the way at this point. Fa'alele, actually the last 2 games are the best he's ever played. So anyway, we'll talk about that. Linderbaum, I'm going to go a little quicker here. His score was reduced by several pass blocking problems in this game. 1.5 pressures, a third of a quarterback hit, had a share of both sacks, 2/3 on the first one where he got really bulled. Bosa stunted and bulled him right back into the quarterback. Hargrave got there later by freeing himself from Simpson. I did end up giving Simpson a third of that, but it was pretty much all on Linderbaum for letting Bosa bull him right into Jackson on the play. There's no place to go. And one missed block is great for a game, and it was in level 2. It's at L2NB as I have it. So that's very positive in terms of what he did as a run blocker in this game. 3 level 2 blocks, 3 out of 3 on poles, no pancakes, 2 highlights. Both are highlight combination blocks. Unfortunately, that's a lot of pass blocking mistakes in one game for a center in particular. So at center, he got a 79, which is a D+ on the center scale. It seems completely unfair because it would be a C+ if he were a tackle, for example. But that's the way it is. Centers have fewer opportunities to make pass blocking mistakes, which is where a lot of the larger negative plays come in play.
Right. Forgive me not knowing where he's been trend wise for you, Ken. But looking at ESPN's pass block win rate rankings, which are obviously based on their dots in their models, but they have him as the 6th best interior offensive lineman, 2nd best safety in the NFL. I mean, how closely does it align with what you've seen from him as a pass blocker this season?
His overall score for this year is 0.83, and that's prior to a subjective adjustment, which would raise that maybe by about 0.04. Because it's an above average number, it would be even more than that in terms of accumulating positives. So he's been the Ravens' best or 2nd best lineman. Kevin Zeitler is the other one who's been very close, probably a little bit better. He's at 0.80 for the year, and is on an incredible streak right now. Zeitler is of playing well. It's very close. Who's the best Ravens lineman? Linderbaum. The big thing about him has been, until this game and really a couple games recently, tremendous improvement as a pass blocker. And we weren't sure if that was going to be possible based on physically who he is. And the amount of improvement was probably not as much as he can hope to get down the line, meaning he's going to regress a little bit towards the mean. But that said, he's having a much better year, and he's improved in exactly his area of weakness. And, if you look at him physically, and like we saw him in camp, he's bigger this year. And there's probably some things he's even given up on the run in terms of being a little more mobile down the field, although you wouldn't know it from the block against Seattle, where he's given up a little bit in terms of getting down the field to be a better pass blocker. And I think it's really paid off for him, what sculpting he has done in that way.
Were you there for the first practice of 2022 training camp?
Nope.
Okay. Because when I did a story on Tyler, like midway through training camp this year, the example that I pulled for that as a marker of his progress in pass protection was, I think, literally one of the first reps of an 11. Maybe it wasn't even, maybe it wouldn't have been the first practice of training camp, because I don't think they were in like 11 on 11 work that early. Maybe they were. But anyway, I just remember early in camp, it was Michael Pierce lined up against Tyler Linderbaum. Like, it was maybe the first time all camp that they went at one another one-on-one. And Michael Pierce just did the Michael Pierce dump truck move where he just backed him up 5 yards and basically pancaked him. And fast forward a year, and Tyler Linderbaum is having no problem handling Mike Pierce, which is, in retrospect now, quite the accomplishment, because Mike has had a pretty nice season, all things considered, as a pass rusher, given his relative lack of moves, I guess we could say, as a guy moving upfield. But I think that was a sign of things to come. And for the most part, he obviously he's had some issues with some snaps and the disaster in Pittsburgh, where he tried to draw the Steelers offsides and got the team in trouble with that whole situation. But it's been, like you said, a really, really impressive addressing of a pretty major weakness from that rookie year. And I don't think he's fully healthy. I think Jeff Zrebeck reported maybe a month or two ago that he's been playing through the pain, as I'm sure a lot of guys are. But for him to be as competent as he's been this early in his career is definitely a good sign for what he could be year 3, year 4, year 5, and forever how long the Ravens want to sign him.
Yeah, a great point that all offensive linemen improve from year 1 to year 2, even ones who start out at a very good level. And that was what was so good about Linderbaum's rookie year, was that it was a great starting point to improve. And he's really improved terrifically as a pass blocker in particular, which was the big shortcoming. I'll just say, in terms of how PFF has scored it this year, they have him for 15 pressures, 3 of them quarterback hits, and 0 sacks. And because I give partials, it tends to end up being more. I'm also more defensive of the cone as well. So 15 and 3 are the 2 big numbers. I have him for, in terms of pressures, 10 for the year. So he obviously benefited from not getting a full on every one of those. 1.5 quarterback hits, where they have him for 3, but I also have him for 2.17 sacks. So that's 2 and 6 sacks. So he's gotten some sack shares from me that they might have counted as pressures at PFF, because they also didn't really believe it was a full sack. And I don't have any problem giving up, handing out partial shares. In fact, I think you're just basically working with finer tools when you do that. If you have only a 1 or 0 to work with, you don't want to use that hammer as often to hit people with the 1. Yeah.
What about Zeitler?
Let's move on. First game below a B since week 6 in London. He left early, half a pressure. That was his only negative event. It was a weird play where he walked back across the cone without a dance partner. And it just got Lamar in trouble. And Lamar ran him out of that one, or out of one other pressure where he got backed up. 8 missed blocks. That's kind of a lot, but 3 of them were losses at the line of scrimmage, so it wasn't a ton. And he had 6 of those misses come on run plays. So I did see PFF gave a fairly low run score. I would agree with that, that it wasn't certainly a normal standard for him. 0 to 2 on pulls, 0 blocks in level 2, no pancakes, 2 highlight help blocks. Now, the big one was Moses actually gave up a pressure to Bosa. And it was fairly late in the game, I think this occurred. And Zeitler came over for the help block and actually pancaked Bosa before, so he could not get the sack delivered. But that was a very big play and a fantastic highlight for Zeitler in terms of taking away from the season. So C+ for him.
So Bosa must have been pancaked at least twice, right? Then because Moses had the pancake in the run game. I think in that second half, I wonder how many games Nick Bosa's played where he's gotten pancaked twice in a game, because he's a guy who's built different. He looks like a Caucasian Myles Garrett out there. Honestly, just with all of his muscles and just how yoked up he is. So I guess credit to the Ravens for kind of putting him back in his place, because I think he's probably used to playing above the rim, so to speak.
Yeah. He's certainly normally very effective. Let's talk about Moses since we just got into him. Another solid game. Played only 46 snaps in this, 2.5 pressures, a third of a quarterback hit. Its scoring system is more forgiving of tackles who give up a little bit of pressure in some games like this. He also helped himself by only missing 2 blocks. Only one of those was a loss at the line of scrimmage. That's always good for a game when you can have 1 or 0 losses at the line of scrimmage that aren't among the pressures of the quarterback hits. 2 level 2 blocks, 1 pancake, no pulls, 2 highlight combination blocks for him. You mentioned Moses being out in space and what a pleasure he was to watch. Still a complete surprise to me how great he's been in terms of mobility. Not at all expected when he came here. And he's outstanding pulling tackle. He's really outstanding getting into space. And, even just comparing him to Brown, who wasn't terrible in this regard and could do things that, moving up a half level to seal was well within his wheelhouse. Moses just can do a lot more.
Yeah. I complimented him on his ability to get out in space before training camp, and he was taken aback by the praise. So I think if you were able to recite what you just told me about him, I'm sure he would appreciate it. Great guy.
He would appreciate it. He wouldn't. He would not appreciate it. It's like, why didn't you expect that?
He would. No. I think he's a fun-loving guy. I don't know if he's ever been told by a media member that he moves well in space, but I did, and he definitely liked it. Yeah. I mean, that's I forget exactly where the Ravens are efficiency-wise with screens, but that's why they're kind of hiccups in the screen game this year have been disappointing, because Linderbaum is so great on the move. Ronnie Stanley, when he's been healthy, is obviously a significant athletic upgrade over Makari, just in terms of his ability to get to those second level defenders a split second faster, and be the guy to clear out that half yard of space that you need to turn like a 3-yard gain to a 13 or 33-yard gain. And then obviously Moses can do great stuff. So maybe we're just, kind of counting down the days. It's, maybe only a matter of time before they have a game where they're just, killing a team with screens and, the kind of stuff that has made the 49ers so effective about, if these teams are going to play Zay Flowers as much as they are, then maybe you take advantage of that by, give him a convoy to kind of run in front of. But, that is, I guess, just kind of one thing I would like to see the Ravens try to weaponize a little bit more effectively, is just how well some of these guys can move in space, even if, that means that you're kind of playing into the defense's hands if they're, defending Lamar with spies, and, you kind of are throwing into clogged areas. So I don't know. It's a real tug of war, I guess, there with the screens and the decision to use them or not use them when you have someone like Lamar in the backfield.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I think a lot of people would love to see the screen pass come to Baltimore. It's something that's been missing for a very, very, very long time. I guess Ray Rice, was probably the last guy who was really running a fair number of good checkdowns like that in space. And even those weren't all screens, but the Ravens' interior line at that time was unbelievably great. I don't think we appreciated having Yonda Burke and Grubbs all at the same time, and just how fantastic that crew was. I'll move on a little bit. Falele, solid in 16 snaps. He's put together a 2-game run here that I'm just going to talk about it a little bit, because it doesn't seem like much until you realize how bad Fa'alele has honestly been before this. But I don't mean that in a bad way. I really want this to sound good, because it is a positive. He said 49 snaps the last 2 games, and he scored 35 points on that, which works out to be better than a 70 raw score. And with adjustment, might be another 0.04, 0.05 on top of that. So he'd be in the high 70s, which is a very solid C. Now, here's the thing. Fa'alele had never had a previous game of 20-plus snaps scored as anything but an F. And his total sack numbers per passing snap played are exactly at the heart of that. He's just given up a ton of sacks during his time. It's not even really penalties. It's sacks. To see him play this well, even over a 49 snap period, gives me a lot of hope that he's going to be a little bit better down the road, and hopefully they can depend on him a little bit to play some more right tackle as needed.
Yeah, or I guess I'm curious. Maybe the Ravens showed their hand with, and have shown their hand with, Ben Cleveland being their 6th offensive lineman, as opposed to someone like Fa'alele. I mean, can you think of any situations where he has been the 6th offensive lineman as opposed to Cleveland? Has it always been Ben out there?
I cannot recall an instance of it. And just in terms of what you'd want out of that position, I think they would always go to Cleveland, just because he's kind of a natural guard, and you probably want a natural guard because you're working more with space than you want a natural tackle out there. A large lumbering tackle. So let's change really what we're talking about here. The only guy that I ever remember them using, and we know he was a tremendous athlete, was Haloti Ngata, in terms of a guy that they would go for real size on the edge. And that was not, there was no question of athleticism with him.
Now you got me thinking about how Minnesota used Daniel Fa'alele, and now I'm wondering if the Ravens take care of business against the Steelers like they did in 2019, where it just becomes kind of a runaway joke with not a whole lot of stakes. And maybe Tyler Huntley, it's the 4th quarter, the Ravens are up like 24-10. They get inside the 3, then they get inside the 1. I wonder if there's any primal desire from Todd Monken to line Daniel Fa'alele in the backfield and give him the carry, just like what's his face, the PJ Fleck at Minnesota did that one time. Or maybe you have him line up at fullback at and pretend to and block someone, or go out on a pass route on a play action. I mean, just can you imagine how loud M&T Bank would get if Daniel Fa'alele scores a touchdown to just rub dirt in the eyes of Steelers of a Steelers team that might be it's probably not heading to the playoffs. It might be going to their first losing season, right? Yeah, that's still in play for Pittsburgh, isn't it? Yeah,
they need to win one of the last 2 to keep Tomlin's streak alive that way. But earlier this year, the 26-yard reception, I think it was, whatever it was by Ricard, might have been 29. The internet is a wonderful thing. So I looked up, by weight, what had happened, but you can't. Okay, exactly. Not only did somebody, figure this out, that Ty Sambrailo is the only player of higher weight that's ever had a reception as long, but somebody's able to immediately produce video of it and show the thing on Twitter. But you ask the question, and people help out, very quickly on that. But his second longest ever reception by a man weighing, I think it was 300 pounds or more, was the record he set at that point.
When was what year was the play by the guy you just mentioned?
Ty Sambrailo's play was during the NFL Plus era, since they've had all the videos since 2009. Okay. But I couldn't tell you whether it was 2017, 18, 16, whatever it might have been. It might have been more recent than that even. But he was able to obviously go back and use that resource to get it. Anyway, Fa'alele, a solid game. I'll go quickly. McCary made 7 of his 8 blocks, left for the concussion, of course. And I don't think we need to talk about too much there, because either of those guys, neither of them gets a letter grade on the game, being under 20 blocks. But both of them were quite solid, I thought, in this one. So that was a nice backup tackle play that the Ravens got.
Yeah, and McCary in the concussion protocol, limited participant today, but good to see him out there on the field at the end of the walkthrough. Don't know what that suggests as for his level of activity, but it's always a good sign when these guys who are technically in the protocol are at least limited on the first day of the practice week. So hopefully trending up to be able to be available for Sunday's game against Miami.
Great point. And I know that with Matt at BK, the Ravens really benefited, I think, from having that second week off, because when the second week he was still limited after the bye. So thank goodness in terms of getting him back in time.
I mean, to piggyback on your point, I guess pretty much anyone who was diagnosed with a concussion coming out of Monday would basically be ruled out, because if it's a longest of long shots to make it through the protocol on a Sunday to Sunday turnaround, then to do it on a Monday to Sunday turnaround would be just about impossible.
Great point. All right. Why don't we talk a little bit about the skill position players? And I really don't want to take any more of your time than I need to here, but anybody that we haven't talked about that you'd like to put in some words for in this game?
I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about Rashad Bateman lately. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much of the all 22 film you are grinding, especially on dropbacks. But have you talked about the much publicized, often shared chart of PFF data that shows just how much he's separating, and does that match up with your eye tests from what you've seen?
I don't know that I would say it definitely does or definitely doesn't. We may have a favorite side of the field situation going on where Bateman usually lines up on the left side, so a lot of his routes go there. That could be something that's dragging back on it. But I mean, coming out of Minnesota, he's the best route runner the Ravens have. Beckham is one of the best of the last decade, but Beckham doesn't have the instant quickness that he has anymore. We have Flowers, and he's a very sudden athlete. But he's not a great route runner. Great route runners throw wiggle and make their opponent make a mistake at the top of the stem, and that's what Bateman does. Right. And so he should be the best. I would expect him to be the highest separation of the Ravens receivers based on that. And by the way, Flowers had an incredible separation game in this last game. Did you see it? Something like 4.7 yards per play that Next Gen posted, and you throw to him for this minimal amount of yards per target. After that,
I do wonder. I do wonder how much of that is contextual. When in the same way that we were, and I use the royal we to talk about the NFL media and Ravens media, we're talking about how quickly and how accurately Lamar was throwing for the first half of the season, when a lot of that was premised on he's throwing more screens than he ever has. He's throwing more quick game than he ever has. So obviously you have this lower degree of difficulty, and if you're throwing screens, then your accuracy is going to get up, and your time to throw is going to go up. And as the Ravens have weaned themselves off the screens, Lamar's accuracy has come down, and his time to throw has gone up. And in the same way that if all Zay Flowers is getting RPOs because a guy is blitzing and his slot defender is lining 8 yards off the line of scrimmage, well, then obviously that is going to do wonders for his average separation.
Yes. and maybe true of screen passes too, that if he backs up 3 yards into the backfield to take the pass and no one's jetting after him right at that point, he might have 6 yards of separation or more on those plays to start with. Exactly. That may not mean much. I completely agree with that, and I'd want to dig deeper into that to see what are the components of each of that, and that's the way you determine if it made contextual sense. And you see, I see what's happening if you really looked into that. That's a hard work component to football analysis that just doesn't always show up in things, but just lay out the components of what you're doing. Look at every single play. Universal review of things is critical, but then try to understand what are the common threads between the pieces of data you just collected are. And I don't see that. It's not natural. Film people, they want to show you one clip that supports their position. And it's one of the things that I have a lot of problems with. Great. I mean, if you don't have an agenda and you just want to show one clip and say, this is a great rep by Patrick Queen, I respect the way that Ryan Mink does that, for example. I think he does a very good job of going through individual clips, putting them out there and saying that. What I don't like is, here's why the Ravens offense is so dangerous. Lamar Jackson is beating everybody anytime they pressure him, and they have two clips of him, Lamar, winning with pressure, when you and I both know Lamar's had generally above average season, but a very up and down season in how he's reacted to pressure. I think completeness of analysis requires more, and it's something that's very hard for a lot of people to do. They either don't have the time for it, they don't really have the desire to do it. And there's sometimes they're uncomfortable trying to fish through that kind of information for meaningful conclusions that can come for it. And what you're saying about the context things means you have all the ability to do it, Jonas. It's just it's an extremely time consuming process to go through that. That said, I trust your judgment on these things at a very high level, just because of the way you process information in the way you described it right there.
Yeah, and not an offensive player, but just thinking about the contextual gymnastics that some people choose not to participate in or engage in. Just, I think Marlon Humphrey's having a great season personally, but I get why people wouldn't think that, because he has been on the business side of a couple big plays that have victimized the Ravens. To start with, obviously, the Pickens touchdown against Pittsburgh, and then obviously the kind of late fourth quarter receptions that he allowed, and the interception that he couldn't come down with against LA. But I feel like every game that he's played after the game that he's come back from injury, he's been stellar. There was a stretch there before he got hurt against Cleveland where he'd allowed like 3 catches for something like 18 yards in like a 4-game span or something like that. And, because he's not, fruit punch Marlon anymore, because he's playing on the outside and he's not able to get his hands on, guys going over the middle or, go for the strip balls on ball carriers. And that somehow means that he's not as impactful or important a player. I mean, I think it's a bunch of hooey. And, it was interesting to see him move back into the slot and be really, really impactful against the 49ers, just because of how they like to, line up personnel wise. But I still think, having him be your cornerback one on this team with as many great defensive back pieces that the Ravens have is a great thing. And, I think Brandon Stevens had a tough night in some regards against San Francisco, which is not a surprise because Ayuk and Samuel are 2 of the best receivers in the NFL. But if he's your number 2 and Marlon's your number 1, then I think you really have to like how you match up against pretty much any offense in the AFC.
I wouldn't even mind if it was the other way around, but I guess it doesn't really matter, really, if it was who's number 1 and number 2.
Doesn't matter at all.
I don't want to go too far down this because I know we're way over time here, but Humphrey had one of the great physical plays you'll ever see, in McKivitz, who obviously was on the business end of a lot of bad news in this last game, pulled from right tackle. So it was when he's pulling a right tackle to get ahead of a stretch run right by McCaffrey. And Marlon Humphrey ran downhill right into McKivitz. So first of all, there's not a lot of cornerbacks who are outweighed by more than 100 pounds by the guys they're running into, who are going to go directly into that contact. But not only did he hit him hard, he backed him up about 3 yards in the process. McKivitz didn't get his hands on him. He couldn't fling him to the ground or do any of the things that he probably should have done on the play. But he backed him up by 3 yards. Anyway, McCaffrey bubbles to the outside. Just exactly what you do to blow up a run play. You bubble it. And Matabike and Roquan Smith made the tackle for -1. Those 2 guys got up off the tackle and they're high-fiving each other. Humphrey is on his knees behind the play, and I'm thinking, there's a guy over there who deserves the credit. You should be high-fiving him.
Yeah.
And it's just funny.
I love him. I love his personality, but who would never do that of recent Ravens vintage is Marcus Peters. Marcus Peters would have been taking that play off. Marcus Peters is not bubbling any run plays against the 49ers. Ball hawk, instincts of a defensive genius, but run defense optional, frankly, for the past couple of years of his career, which is a shame because he's so much fun to watch in other aspects of his game.
Yeah, definitely true. Anybody else you want to talk about here? I think we've talked about Likely. We've talked about Hill, Edwards. How about Nelson Aguilar coming back and making that play?
How about it? There are a couple Eagles fans in my life, so whenever Nelson Aguilar does anything interesting or good, I make sure to let them know about it. But I don't know if he's ever going to have like another 50-yard game over the rest of the season, but if he can just be the guy who gets open at crucial spots like he did against the Rams and obviously like he did against the 49ers, and that very small contract the Ravens gave him will be totally worth it. I mean, I think it's probably already paid for itself just by the kind of confidence that he was able to give Lamar in some of those early days of training camp where there weren't a lot of other guys either up to speed or healthy. So he's definitely meshed well with this Ravens locker room. I think he's very much beloved, and it's good to see him be a part of the celebrations and be as involved as he has been. It's been interesting that like despite the PFF stats of how much separation Rashad Bateman is getting, it seems like it's a pretty close to 50-50 split between Aguilar and Bateman for that third wide receiver spot. If we're assuming that Zay and OBJ are 1-2, so I think that's a pretty glaring indication of how the coaching staff thinks about those guys and what kind of value they're adding to the offense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what he's done in terms of being a guy on extended plays has been something the Ravens could really go to. He's had 38 targets, which is probably 2.5 times what I thought he might have this year. Certainly double. I really didn't see him as a guy who's going to get on the field a lot. I'm happy with the contract. I'm still not really thrilled about giving up the 6th round draft pick, but it is what it is. And I'm okay with it at this point. I think he's done enough to justify it on that basis. The other thing I'm really not happy about, though, I got to tell you, with the Ravens is how much void money they've already spent out of 24. Because there's a year where they're going to have 43% of the snaps leaving in free agency, and they're already down, $20 million or so in terms of void year expenditures. Might be more than that. That they're going to have to eat before the year even starts. So, they'll have to continue to kick the can down the road to re-sign just a fraction of the players who are leaving or get other ones to replace them.
Yeah, it's going to be a quiet off season in terms of probably not a whole lot of welcome to Baltimore press conferences. Maybe welcome back to Baltimore press conferences if they find a way to do a deal with Matabike. But it's get used to it, guys. It's going to be this is going to be the new normal, I think, for as long as Lamar's under contract.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the nature of second quarterback contracts, is every dollar is scrutinized. Are you ready to go with a 3-2-1 MVP list?
Yeah, I guess one before we do MVP, not to look too far ahead, but have you thought at all about kind of the thought experiment, if you want? It's not really a thought experiment, but like, are you at all curious about what a week 18 game for Tyler Huntley might look like as it stands as like a kind of photo negative of the Lamar Jackson passing experience? We know Tyler has that second play ability, but I think back to when he was rookie year, and he came in for Lamar after he hurt his ankle, I guess it was, and Rashad Bateman had that great game. Lamar's not really the kind of guy to like throw back shoulder fades, and that's something that Tyler seems like he's more willing and or able to do. Lamar's not really super into like throwing those stick routes. That's something that Tyler Huntley is more willing and able to do. So for as much as it would be a relief for me for the Ravens to wrap things up and just kind of have their playoff situation settled, I am also just kind of maybe morbidly curious to see how different a Ravens passing attack with everyone on that wide receiver core involved, but a different quarterback manning it would look.
It's a really interesting thing because not like we have no experience with this. So we do. Right. We kind of have a limitation in terms of not having a lot of receivers here the last couple of years, which may be the point you're making. But the ball had to be out quickly. In 21 when he came in, and also in 22 when he came in, because tackle play was not at let's say an ideal level. Certainly not in 21 with Alejandro Villanueva manning the left side. Right. And in 22 there were problems there as well at various times during the season. The ball had to be out quickly both years. Really limited what Huntley could do. In a lot of ways, I think what he did was pretty impressive. To help the Ravens stay close in as many games as they did, and still have a chance in 21 to be in the playoffs almost to the end of the year. It's just it's a in terms of what will the offense look like. Honestly, right now with the Ravens situation being what they have as tackle, I think the ball would be out quickly again. I think his own pocket awareness is, while he has some additional throw ability that's higher, and we've seen that in the preseason, his own pocket awareness is very low. And every time that he's been in there, he's found ways to make sacks out of what should have been throwaways, whereas Lamar generally scrambles or will go down for a shorter sack a lot of times. So I think that leads to offensive coordinators to want to scheme the ball out quickly. And unfortunately, I think that's what might be what we'd see again in Week 18. I think it'd be a lot of protection. And would you be shocked if we saw Malik Cunningham in the game too?
Gosh, I hadn't even considered that. I guess I wouldn't be. I mean, they talked about how he's lining up at a bunch of different spots in practice. I haven't really gotten eyes on him doing anything but quarterback drills. I guess it would, maybe they would line him up at wide receiver if they want to rest Zay, rest OBJ. It would seem more likely that they would call up, Laquan Treadwell and have him active on game day ahead of Malik Cunningham if there is a consideration of him at wide receiver. I don't know. Maybe
Cunningham's on the 53, so he's already there. He
right.
Called up. Yeah.
But yeah, and maybe there's like a weird two quarterback package that they would, get funky with. But yeah, I guess I hadn't really considered that. But just thinking about it now, it would probably be a pretty limited role for him, just considering how little time he spends in the offense and under Todd Monken. But players talk about how relatively easy this offense is to learn. So maybe you throw him out there for one random drive in the second quarter and see if he sinks or floats.
Mm-hmm. How about we talk some MVPs? 3, 2, 1. Good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's your number 3 guy?
Number 3, it's tough because after the top 2, there's not a whole lot of obvious candidates. I guess I'll go with what you have, which is Gus. Relatively efficient running the ball. I know we didn't talk a whole lot about running efficiency in that first pod we did, but just looking at the rushing yards over expectation, he was +4. So pretty close to average. Justice Hill -24, a little bit of a yikes there. Mm-hmm. Lamar obviously +17, but just the nice touchdown that he had on 4th and 1, and then of course the long catch and run, which kind of added a nice little highlight to the Lamar Jackson possible MVP reel. It's always fun to see him rumble in space. It was fun to see him, do the thing that we see him do seemingly every other week now, where he becomes like a lead blocker for Justice Hill or for Keaton Mitchell or for Lamar Jackson. That's always just a bit of a funny football just instance, because how many times do you see a guy like Gus Edwards become an actual lead blocker for someone else and have it be as effective as it seemingly always is? So yeah, I mean, with just the dearth of obvious options and some of the injuries that the guys along the offensive line took, I guess I'll agree with you and go with Gus Edwards.
I think it's a good choice, and I like all the things you did. I like the pony backfield. The one other statistical thing I'll add is that if you look at the DVOA success rating success percentages on run plays, all of the Ravens running backs are right up there near the top of the league, including Hill. Yeah. So it's even if the plays go for relatively short yards and there's not a chance for a lot of yards over expectation when you are running from the 1 yard line. How many yards over expectation can you possibly get? So anyway, he's been tremendously successful in that particular regard in terms of having a high success rate. The other guy that I would mention that I didn't include in my top 3 was my top honorable mention was Isaiah Likely. Was the guy who was having trouble deciding if he'd be the 3 or 4 guy.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Another nice long catch and run. I don't know how he graded out as a pass blocker or run blocker, but just what he gives you as a guy who can stress linebackers or stress safeties. Not Mark Andrews level, but he's definitely getting there level wise.
He got a little piece of Warner on the touchdown that the announcers took the time to talk about on the touchdown by Edwards. So that was nice. That was the 4th and 1, right? I think it was.
Yep.
All right, your number 2 guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna step on your toes and go with Zay, even though it wasn't super enthralling. Aside from that one touchdown catch, I think the 9 catches were tied a career high. If he'd hit 10, he would have had a new personal best. But just another kind of strange day for the receiving box score to see Lamar go for 250, and you kind of scratching your head looking at who it was who was like the second and third leading receiver after Zay. But he's going to be, I guess, because of Odell's injury concerns and just the wear and tear of the season, it's, I guess, pretty safe to say that he's wide receiver 1 at this point. Even though that title can and has changed week by week, but he was there. He did he have the one drop? I forgot. I know Bateman had a drop. Did Zay have a drop?
Did Zay have a drop? Actually, I can't remember. I can't remember a drop in this game. Might have been, but I just can't remember.
But for the most part, pretty sure-handed considering the volume of passes that he got thrown his way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm in agreement, and I thought that the play that really stood out with all of the short passes, he basically has been tossed. It actually is not the full yards of the target were not captured on that pass play, which is towards the back of the end zone where he found space on that 9-yard touchdown. So while it showed up probably as 9, it really was more like 17 or something. So it's a exceptional place to find space. One of the best is in the end zone, and Flowers has been effective. Celebrations aside, he's been very effective at getting in the end zone recently.
Yeah, another great celebration. None of the linemen that I asked about knew what the hell was going on. So that was obviously like a only the cool kids, sit at this lunch table kind of thing, because Ronnie Stanley or Tyler Linderbaum did not have a clue what was going on. Morgan Moses, who's very much in the Lamar circle, also had no idea what was going on.
I thought the interception by Hamilton, that celebration for that was really pretty cool, going under the Christmas tree and finding a football.
Oh, okay. So that's what it was.
They opened his present. It was a football.
Okay. I never got any. I never thought to ask for clarity on that. And obviously Kyle was banged up, so we didn't get a chance to talk to him after the game. But looking at the celebration again today, I was like, is he shaking open like a magic potion and like awakening the genie? But no, Christmas tree makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, your number 1 guy. I'm sure we got the same.
Yeah, why don't you take the floor?
Whoa, Lamar Jackson, and I think it's this is obviously a big flip in narrative in terms of who the MVP is in the league. And before the game, you could get 5-1 on Lamar Jackson, and now you get 3-5 on Lamar Jackson. And before the game, you could get 3-5 on Brock Purdy, pretty much, and now you can get 13-1. Actually, I was told Jeremy Kahn, who's much more into this than I am, said he'd seen it as high as 16-1 today.
Isn't he like now 6th? I think 6th in the MVP.
I'll look it up while you talk about Lamar here. I'll go ahead and get the current best prices.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wrote about this in the game recap, but just Lamar is. It's going to be, if and when he wins this MVP, it's going to be a very interesting highlight reel for an MVP, because it's a lot of small things that he's doing well. You think back to 2019, he had the he is Houdini run against the Bengals. He had a 5 touchdown night against the Rams. He had the single season rushing record for a quarterback. And right now, a lot of his biggest plays, I think, were in that first half of the season. Like the game against Detroit, the game against Seattle. He's had really impressive plays, but not super. They either haven't scored or they just haven't been that splashy that you expect from an MVP. So I'm really excited, or not excited. I'm really interested to see like the range of appraisals of what this MVP season could be, and what it says about Lamar, and what it says about the NFL in 2023, and what it says about like just kind of what it takes to win MVP. The whole idea this is now more of a Heisman Trophy situation where it's like the best player on the best team, except in exceptional circumstances, because in terms of all the advanced metrics, in terms of like the counting stats, this is nowhere near 2019, but he's doing things in 2019 that he definitely did not do. And we should give him full credit for that. And, yes, he has a really great defense. Yes, he has a really great special teams unit, but he's also doing extremely impressive things to lift this offense in spite of some of the circumstances and some of the injuries that I guess would cripple another offense with a lesser quarterback.
We didn't get to the whole mailbag, but one of the points made was, how can PFF grade the gravitational pull of Lamar Jackson? And they can't. They'd be the first to admit they can't. And that's really where the value is. A lot of it is, the Ravens running game is still extraordinarily effective, even at lower yards per carry in terms of success rate metrics or other things. And it's good. But I got the odds on the MVP here. Let's go through these really quickly. Lamar Jackson, $1 bet returns you $1.59. So you make 59 cents for every dollar you bet. Christian McCaffrey, your dollar gets you back $7.50. Joe Burrow, it's $9.50. Tua, $11. Brock Purdy, $15.
Wait, Joe Burrow's third?
Oh, I'm sorry. He is listed out there. It's obviously a sucker bet because he's the only one player is there. Great point. This is a sucker bet that Caesars has obviously got left out there. So if somebody wants to, weird. It's out there. Nobody else is offering has a price on him. Tua, $11. Brock Purdy, $15. Josh Allen, $15, and then it drops off to Dak Prescott and Tyreek Hill at $26. So they're the only those 25 to 1 shots are the only two that are better than 40 to 1. So Jackson is the man. If he gets through this game, he's got it.
Right. I'm not much of a bettor, but I guess I do understand the notion of value bets, and this is a really good Miami defense that's coming up. And if Lamar struggles, and if the Bills can turn the Jets on and win these next 2 games, and he just goes supernova, I mean, the advanced stats love him. He's obviously had a turnover issue, but he's also been just a scoring machine. So if you are a fan of long shot bets, I wouldn't be opposed to you putting money on Josh Allen. That's definitely something to consider. But obviously, I think the all the smart money for now would definitely be on Lamar. If you haven't gotten it there already.
Yeah, there's kind of a race to the bottom. It looks like on Purdy. He eliminated any chance, as far as I'm concerned, to win the MVP based on what happened on this national stage. And I think it,
especially with Sam Darnold coming in right after him and doing basically just as good a job, if not better.
Yeah. All right, Jonas, such a pleasure to talk football with you. Thanks for joining us again. Tell people where they can talk football with you online.
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at Jonas_Schaefer. Obviously, playoffs are coming up, so got a lot of great coverage plans hopefully coming together over these next couple of weeks. $1 for 6 months. Got a podcast that I host with my bud Paul Mancano, who also works for the Banner. Just called the Banner Ravens Podcast. We do Thursday preview shows and Sunday or Monday night post-game shows as well. Only about a half hour, so a relative digest compared to the opuses of the
sorry about this
kind of music store. But yeah, just if you like our stuff, just tell other people, because we're still trying to build some brand awareness for the Banner, and just try to find a spot in the Baltimore media ecosystem.
All right, great stuff. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. I want to hear what your idea is for a show, and I want to talk to you about it and massage it into something we do in 15 to 20 minutes. I swear that's really what I'm trying to get to, Jonas. I want to have some shorter content that people will look at. I found myself watching YouTube videos, and I want to learn what's going on in the Ukraine. I want to hear about history and various things. There's a lot of things I want to get. And then I look at it and I'm saying, I can't do a 40-minute video. And I'm thinking, somebody's doing that to my podcast out there. They're saying I can't listen because of that. Anyway, really appreciate the loyalty of this audience. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this. I'm sure Jonas completely paid it off in terms of this episode. Jonas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it for having me.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.